All right, today we're going to be talking about what it means and what to do if you have an ex that says that they can do better than you. Now, this video is actually kind of the weird dark twin to the video that I just last posted, which is actually the opposite of this video. The video basically covered what it means or what to do if you have an ex that says that you can do better than them, whereas this video is about what it means and what to do if you have an ex that says they can do better than you. So there's really a lot to unpack here if you have an ex that says that they can do better than you. There's if they mean what they say or not, the context in which it is said, and what you should be doing going forward. So what we're going to do is tackle those big questions so that you get the answers that you are so desperately seeking. Hey there, real quick, I want to say that if you're new to this YouTube channel or you're trying to figure out what you should be doing to get your ex back and you're trying to learn if you even have a chance in your specific circumstance, probably the smartest thing for you to do is actually stop by our website, www.exboyfriendrecovery.com, or take our Ex Recovery Chances quiz that can be found at exboyfriendrecovery.com. Now, if you're watching this on YouTube, taking that free quiz is super easy to do. All you have to simply do is look in the description link below this YouTube video and click on the link you see there. It will take you directly to the quiz where you can fill it out and get an easy answer on what you should be doing going forward and overall what your chances look like in your specific situation. All right, so let's get you back to the video. So let's tackle the big one. When your ex says that they can do better than you, do they mean it? This is actually going to be controversial, but I am not one to tell people what they want to hear. I'm one to tell people what they need to hear. So here's the truth. If you have an ex that says that they think they can do better than you, they absolutely mean it in the moment. Now, that in the moment part is a key thing to grasp here. A lot of times people think that an ex who says this, it's essentially them admitting that they never loved you or they never had feelings for you or that they're never going to come back to you. And while some of those can certainly be true, more than likely it's kind of unlikely. And I'd also like to point out that oftentimes when an ex says something like this, it's happening during a really emotional moment. Now, we've all heard this same old adage, when emotions run high, logic runs low, and that's kind of what happens here. And many times you'll find that when exes say this, it will be accompanied during the context of an argument. And usually during arguments, they're trying to find something to say to hurt you as much as possible. So, now that we have if they mean it out of the way, let's start talking about what to do. Now, a lot of people get confused on what to do. You can actually just do a simple Google search of, hey, what does it mean when an ex says that they can do better than you? Do they mean it? What should I do? And usually the consensus is going to be revolving around the same idea, which is make them regret their decision. And there's actually some credence to this concept of making exes regret. So what's interesting is I always refer to the study where I'm interviewing success stories. And what's really interesting to me is we're always looking for those patterns that work and don't work. But one of the patterns that we did notice is a lot of the success stories really dealt with regret, meaning their ex made some comment or acted when they felt like they regretted their decision to break up with them. Now, here's the interesting thing. Not a lot of people try to gain an in-depth understanding of regret. We just simply assume that we know what it is without actually understanding the psychology that goes behind it. So that's what we're going to dig into now. So the first thing when you're dealing with regret that you really need to understand is where emotions derive from. Now, this may be seeming like a weird thing to talk about, but I guarantee you it will make sense in a moment. So, emotions arise in response to events that are important to the individual's goals, motives, or concerns. Generally speaking, if something happens with a person's goals, motives, or concerns, both negative or positive, an emotion is bound to get created. Now, what is interesting is regret is sort of the antagonist of this idea. It's the only emotion that arises when an event does not occur. So an event that might have been is usually something that will create regret. It's a fantasy. So regret is an emotion that you feel when you know you made the wrong decision. And in retrospect, you wish you could have made a different one. Another interesting thing about regret is it requires a lot of introspection. And what do I mean by that? Introspection. Well, simply put, it requires you to sit back and do some deep thinking about opportunities lost. Now, ultimately, if you want to understand how to create regret, we need to look at the pillars of regret, of which there are 3. So let's just tackle them. Pillar number 1, time has to have passed. So this inevitably seems kind of like a simple one to talk about. Regret usually is coupled when time passes, but there's actually kind of an interesting twist to this idea. It doesn't take a genius to sit there and say, well, regret, enough time has to pass for them to think, and then they'll feel the emotions of regret, and yeah, I guess time kind of works there. But what's interesting is not a lot of people look at time in the following way. So studies have shown that over short periods of time, people are more likely to regret actions taken and mistakes made, whereas over long periods of time, they are more likely to regret actions not taken, such as missed opportunities for love, or working too hard, or not spending enough time with family. Now, this kind of backs up what we're finding from our success stories. There's a reason why our process does take longer, but is also arguably more successful than everyone else's. That's because we take enough time to create that kind of regret, where they're looking or fantasizing about a future that could have been, instead of just trying to immediately get fast results. Pillar number 2, you must become the catalyst for regret. In other words, the easier it is to envision a different outcome, the more likely we are to regret a lost opportunity. Now, this is like the obvious advice that most breakup experts will sit there and say. When you go through a no contact rule, make yourself look like you're having the greatest time in the world, because ultimately doing these types of things will create a catalyst of, oh, I wish I could have been there doing that with her, or I wish I could have been there doing that with this person. The only really thing that pops into my mind when I'm looking at probably the best example of being a catalyst for regret that I've seen is something that I've been talking a lot about with Coach Anna on our podcast episodes lately that we've been doing together. On there, if you've listened to any of the podcast episodes, you will have definitely heard the story that we keep going on and on about of the Rose Bowl text. It's essentially Coach Anna, when she was at the beginning of our program, used a text on her ex-boyfriend while she was at the Rose Bowl. Now, if you don't know, the Rose Bowl is like this gigantic college football bowl game that happens at the end of the year where 2 really good teams basically fight it out. Yeah, you don't really care about that. But here's the important part. Another guy took her to the Rose Bowl, and she took a picture of while the game was going on of the Rose Bowl and sent it to her ex-boyfriend. Now, this worked because it created regret. He's sitting there and reading this thinking, that could have been me. So if you want to create regret with your ex, you need to do something that becomes a catalyst for regret. And in order to do that, what you're ultimately shooting on trying to do is do something or say something or post something that makes them wish they were there with you. And finally, pillar number 3, the importance of momentum. This may seem kind of like a weird thing to talk about because it really doesn't seem to have anything to do with regret. I would actually argue that's not true, but you need to kind of put on your you just gotta bear with me here, I guess. So catalyst number 2, or pillar number 2, was talking about the importance of becoming a catalyst. This one helps you actually become the catalyst. Because a lot of times what people do is they end up feeling sorry for themselves after they go through a breakup. They become too anxious. They obsess about what their ex is doing, who they're talking to, things of that nature, and they just kind of let it get to them to the point where they don't take any action at all. One of my first ever coaching clients had this problem. We would get on a coaching call and I would literally sit there and say, okay, these are the things that you need to do. These are the goals that you need to set for yourself. And she would be just over the moon about it. She would love it. She'd be like, yes, I can't wait. Then we had another coaching call 2 weeks later. And I said, okay, where are we at? What have you done? Nothing. Now, this wasn't her fault. I take responsibility because I have an ongoing war with goal setting. Because I think sometimes goal setting isn't as effective as creating healthy habits. Because habits get you into the groove, they get you into the momentum to where you can achieve those goals. What I should have done with that coaching client isn't setting specific goals. It should be getting her to take an action to create some type of a healthy habit that would eventually lead to hitting that goal. And you can do the same thing. If you're listening to this story of the Rose Bowl text that I talked about with Coach Anna, a big thing about that is she had kind of a lucky situation, right? But that's not the only thing that you can do to create a catalyst or become a catalyst for yourself. Sometimes it's as simple as being really smart about what you're posting on social media. Sometimes you don't feel like posting things on social media. Sometimes you just don't feel like doing anything noteworthy. But if you take a healthy habit or start creating healthy habits for yourself, you'll notice it becomes a lot easier. Hey there, thanks so much for getting to the end of this video. Now, if you haven't already, make sure you stop what you're doing and take the X Recovery Chances quiz that I talked about in this video. Doing so is super easy if you're watching this on YouTube. Simply look in the description below and click the link you see there. It will take you to the quiz where you can just fill it out and get an ideal scenario of where you stand with your ex. Also, if you haven't liked, commented, or subscribed to our YouTube channel, please do so. Every little bit helps. I'll see you next time.